Welcome to the International Academic Space with me, Dr. Mona Mustafa. Joining me on the panel, we also have Dr. Vic Benuyenah and Dr. Ray Deala. Today, our topic is really revolving around why well-being matters, empowering academic institutions. The International Academic Space is really a space where we hear from diverse experts on a regular basis to get in-depth knowledge on significant issues that really impact the academic space. In line with the October month, which is all about well-being, we thought to keep the theme and talk about this pressing issue. Well, with COVID-19, economic turmoil, the UK's cost of living crisis, and war have all had reaching impacts on people's well-being and have really brought a lot of changes on to organizations and really bringing well-being at the forefront. Our guest this morning in this exclusive session is Group CEO of Wellbeing at Work World, Chris Cummings. Chris, thank you very much for joining us today from the UK. And it's really an honor to have you with us.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here, and yeah, really pleased to join you all. So thanks for the invitation.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chris. So to start off with, I just want our listeners to know a little bit about Wellbeing at Work World. So Chris, tell us a little bit about the purpose of this organization. I know you set it up over, is it 10 years now, Chris?
We're just coming up to 10 years. Yeah, 2014 we started, and it was really motivated to try and bring leaders from organisations together to try and change the way we were working and create happy, healthy, engaged workplaces. Back then, it was quite a challenge to get many leaders to talk about well-being and the importance of it. But what we've seen over the last 10 years, especially during the COVID period, about the acceleration of awareness of mental health and well-being and the importance of it. So yeah, it's been a great journey, and what we're trying to do is make well-being a strategic priority in every organisation around the world. Because if we do that, if we can reach millions of employees through the workplace, then I'm sure we can make a better world and certainly a better working world for everyone.
Brilliant. Chris, when I met you a few years ago at the World Wellbeing Summit here in Dubai, it was actually just, I think it was, we're coming out of that pandemic, and well-being was really a hot topic. Everybody was talking about it. Where are we now, Chris, after the pandemic? Are organizations still paying attention to this topic, or do you feel from your expert knowledge that this is sort of fading a little bit and taking a back seat?
I think it's changed. I think what's happened, what happened during the pandemic is, we were all put into panic mode almost, and we had to react quickly, and we were playing catch up constantly. So leaders knew immediately they had to do some quick fixing and support their employees. So we saw a lot of quick, short-term quick fixes, which was, we were all in that mode at the time, so it was important to do. I think what's happened since COVID is well-being is still as important, if not more so, but we're getting more intelligent about how we approach it, and we're thinking more strategically. So instead of having those quick fixes and maybe doing something like a quick workshop or having a yoga class, we're actually thinking more strategically. And if you look at some of the data that's coming out from McKinsey, from Gallup, from PwC, from Deloitte, many others, having that wider strategic approach really does matter and really delivers much stronger results. I think, globally, what we've seen is the numbers of burnout going up, cases of mental health going up, because those quick fixes are not really getting to the root of the problem. And we need to look at organizations holistically create a culture of health, create a culture of well-being, and then you start to see the performance and productivity really thrive.
That's great. So it's interesting to see sort of the shift in on the agenda of companies. And I want to now reflect a little bit. We're as academics, we want to think about how well-being is implemented in universities. So I perhaps want to ask Dr. Vic this question maybe. How do you, Dr. Vic, implement some well-being strategies in your classrooms to sort of support your students?
Thank you. First, I would like to clarify that it seems to me, and there's no theory behind this, that happiness is very different from well-being. And that's purely because happiness in itself may be only one of the outcomes of well-being. Well-being is probably much broader. And there are many models behind well-being. One of my favorites is the one put forward by Martin Seligman. It's called the PERMA model. P stands for positive emotions. E stands for engagement. R stands for relationship. M stands for meaning, and A stands for accomplishment. So in my class, relationships matter. So my relationship with the students and their relationship with me is a big part of the whole delivery strategy. I also have to ensure that the M in the PERMA model, meaning, is in place. You know, what am I doing in the classroom to ensure that students are relating with the materials that I'm teaching, and how does that fit into the broader university strategy? So it's quite critical to take into account different backgrounds of students. Students are coming from all different cultures and nations and societies, personalities. So all those things brought together could be a challenge, but there are also opportunities within this that, you know, as academics, the way we manage all the variables. And as a matter of fact, well-being is a multivariate phenomenon. It's not just a few variables that define what well-being is. So it's quite important for me, as well as my colleagues, that we take into account all these different variables to ensure that students are happy. Of course, we have student satisfaction surveys. So whatever we do in our class will feed into these surveys, which will then define whether students are happy or not.
That's lovely. So PERMA, we'll remember this model. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Vic. And perhaps I'd like to get now Dr. Ray's perspective on something slightly different. Dr. Ray, perhaps you still have some vivid memories of remote and online learning. In your experience, how do you see technology impacting well-being for students? You know, thinking about the online learning, remote learning, and your experience as a teacher as well.
Thank you, Mona. Yeah, that's a very interesting part, and especially after the pandemic, you know, online learning has become a prominent part. I mean, online meetings, what we're doing even now, you know, everything is very much online, or basically hand in hand, online and face to face. And with students, during the, you know, that time when it was introduced, you know, in a massive scale, there were a lot of challenges because, you know, everyone was not really comfortable with it. Do I show my background at home? Do I, you know, an issue like that? Do I put my picture on, or do, you know, an issue like that? And so there are a lot of things that basically not only students had to adapt to, but also academics had to adapt to as well, because it was also something that they're experiencing and we were experiencing at the same time. But one of the things which I think stood out quite well was, you know, trying to learn as quickly as we can with regards to how do we engage students? How do we offer the right, you know, kind of platform, not forcing students to do things which they don't want on online kind of platform? So I know there are some academics who had different approaches of saying that you must turn on your camera. But again, having a leeway of ensuring that maybe not all students are capable of doing that because of different, you know, reasons, which might be very legitimate. You give them that opportunity, that space, that, you know, so it's good for you to have your camera on, but you don't necessarily have to have your camera on. It's good to do some of these things, but again, we do understand that there's some circumstances we're not aware of. And again, trying to find techniques of engaging students a bit more. I mean, when you are in the classroom, it's easier for people to see your gestures. It's easier for you to show your engagement. And my research is on work engagement. And just a few days ago, I was doing a presentation on work engagement among academics. What are the factors that cause academics to be engaged and all that. But then at the same time, I've already done a research where the engagement of academics within the classroom has an influence on the positive emotions of their students in the classroom and their engagement in the classroom. And so how do you then ensure that that engagement transfers when you are on an online platform like this? How do you make your presence heard? And so look at different techniques with regards to how you present yourself, but at the same time, how you add other material and content, videos, so you can use videos which are engaging and, all these things that can enable students to feel that, this experience is not a one-way kind of communication. You're just listening to someone and that's it, but you add different varieties of elements to it. And I think at the moment now, we are understanding more of how we can get people engaged and then, feel like they are having, I always call this like the best experience they could have given the circumstance. So that's how I've been trying to do it. And so far, I think it's so good.
Yeah, great. No, I also agree with that, Ray, because I felt, online learning was quite challenging. We had to navigate unknown territories, if you like, and certainly staring at a screen for us as lecturers for 4 hours, it was really, really tedious. I remember the camera light coming in my eyes, sitting there for 4 hours, and of course, students having their cameras switched off. It was really, really challenging, and you had to really work hard to engage them to make sure that they're still learning. And of course, face-to-face is I think much better in terms of engagement, right? So that's really interesting to see the impact of technology. Thank you very much for that. So Chris, I'll come back to you. I mean, it's really encouraging to see that organizations have paid attention to this, to the topic of well-being. There's so many initiatives. However, I was reading a recent report by the CIPD, which was actually published this year, 2023. It's titled Health and Wellbeing at Work. And something quite striking caught my attention, that actually in 2023, this report was done in the UK. They found that there's an increase in sickness absence that has been the highest level in a decade. They found an average of 7.8 days per employee. So what's happening, Chris? Why are employees calling in, absent or sick from work? And from your perspective, what's causing this increase?
Yeah, it's a worrying stat, and I think there's probably a number of reasons. I think we're seeing the effects of COVID actually continuing. But I also go back to my original point of it was front and center when COVID was happening as a strategic priority, and like you say, it's still important, well-being at work, but other priorities have come in, and I think there are many companies doing some wonderful work and being more strategic, but these quick fixes are not having the impact that we need. The numbers, not just the sick days, but the numbers of burnout and mental health, they're all going in the wrong direction. And I think we have to step back and say to ourselves, right, what are we going to do about this strategically instead of trying to do these quick fixes? Because having these smaller short-term initiatives are not having the impact we need. And that goes for, organizations, it goes for across our personal lives, it goes across academia, it goes across all walks of life. We've got to think about, how do we get people engaged? Vic mentioned the PERMA model, which I love, Vic. Having meaning, purpose. Do we have a sense of purpose in our work? Do we have a sense of purpose and meaning in our studies? Because that's going to get those engagement levels up. and it's gonna give us a higher sense of purpose and want to go to work and want to go to university and want to engage. So so yeah, they're worrying statistics. I think there's a number of elements to it. As I say, I think that there are some hangover sort of elements to COVID, but I do think as organisations we've got to think more strategically.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, we hope you know, the next report will show some more promising facts and figures, but I thought that was quite striking. So thank you for that, Chris. Now moving on back to Vic. Vic, I know you've you know, have experience teaching around the world in Dubai, UK, Vietnam, as well as other countries as well. And I was wondering, Vic, if you have noticed any cultural or regional variations in the approach to well-being in education throughout your international experience.
Unfortunately, all the highly rated countries in terms of World Happiness Report are not essentially in Asia. They are in the Scandinavian countries, starting with, I think, Finland, Denmark, Switzerland. Israel, surprisingly, I think is number 4, but New Zealand also is there. I haven't taught in any of these countries, surprisingly, and it's not to suggest that I am a man of no happiness. But whilst in Vietnam, what I notice is that because of collectivism in that culture, people tend to be slightly more happy. And that's because if things fall apart, you have a shoulder to lean on. You have someone in the family to speak to. Whereas in individualist countries, you are on your own, essentially. The state might support you, as in the case of the UK or maybe Germany. But in Asia, the number 1 call for support is your family. So that collectivism, in my view, promotes a lot of well-being among students or the society. My experience in Dubai is very much similar, except that you can divide the population in Dubai or UAE into 2 different dimensions. The local population, who are highly collectivist, and then the expat community, who are not very collectivist. So depending on who you find in your classroom, and I have had experience with the local population exclusively, and I see how they support each other. They are very, very well connected. And so I can see that from that angle, well-being will be much better in those communities. Whereas in the expat individualist communities, you may not likely find that level of well-being that is so desirable.
That's interesting. So there's that cultural element, and that's really interesting. And what about Bray? Do you, I mean, from your experience, you've also had you know, experience working and teaching in Australia, Canada, Dubai as well, and the UK. Do you agree with Doc Vic and you know, what he mentioned in terms of that cultural element?
Oh, thank you. Well, this is actually a very interesting area, and to some extent, there are some things I agree with Vic, but the other things which I've got a different experience on them. And again, well, I actually lived in New Zealand, so it's a happy country, yes, for a bit. And I've been in Tanzania, UAE. I've worked there as well, here in the UK and all. The one thing that I think is, which I found a bit different, is in different countries, there tend to be different focuses. So in the UK, for example, I see there's a lot more talk about well-being, but that is not the case when I was in Tanzania, for instance. Not me, so that sometimes issues of well-being and mental health sometimes are not really spoken. They're more, you know, they seem to be hidden kind of things. People don't feel free to talk about them. And sometimes people feel like it's a sign of weakness. And so you find that most people actually, in my own view, you see them, you know, almost like dying in silence. They don't want to say that this is happening, because most people in the society tend to think that it's, you know, something which is only happening to a few people, and these few people have some kind of effects. And so even if actually there are a lot of people who are experiencing mental health issues, they will not talk about them. And so my experience has been that has been a big difference. I do see that there are trends. People are starting to be a bit more talkative and talk about these issues. But actually, in terms of students, it's still not as significant. So most people in Tanzania would not talk about mental health issues as compared to people here in the UK. They don't have a mental health well-being kind of support group. And so that gives you a different kind of perspective. So it does, to some extent, it's like, okay, we're not talking about it, so the problem is not there. And then actually people are having those problems, but they have them in silence. So that's one of the things I've seen. And yeah, in that regard, other countries as well. I'm not a big fan of the happiness indexes because I mean there could be variables. There are a lot of different things, and at the same time, why I say sometimes I disagree with Vic is in the sense of this idea of collectivist and individualist, Hofstede's kind of approach with regard to societies. I think it is when you go, for example, to Tanzania, it's divided into subgroups as well. In you have different tribes, and different tribes have different ways of living and looking at things. And so, in that sense, I think it's a bit more complex. We are all human beings, as Chris said at the beginning, and so we have that we all experience these elements. But I guess the society itself has a way of, or even the tribes themselves have a way of looking at these issues differently, and whether to think they are a priority or not a priority.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
Sorry, Ray, I think you probably misunderstood what I meant. You seem to focus on mental health, which is sort of forbidden in the societies that you've mentioned. The idea is not, my idea is not about mental health alone. It's about well-being. So well-being is much broader. So the definition of that is the extent to which you see the world as providing you happiness versus pain. So it's quite hedonistic in nature in psychology, where what gives you pleasure versus what gives you pain defines your well-being. And in that regard, in even those smaller societies that you've mentioned, the Himba tribe, the Akan tribe in Ghana, and so on and so forth, you will find that what actually makes them happy or gives them well-being could be that they go to church on every Sunday, or they connect in tribal meetings and they cook food and eat, and that gives them well-being. Whereas in the West, it will be going to the club and perhaps having a pint and that sort of thing. So I agree with you. It's very complex, but if you look at well-being, it can be characterized based on society or societal attributes.
Great, thank you, Vic.
That, but thank you. But again, I get that the dynamic and the explanation that you're providing, Vic. But again, one of the big dimensions of well-being is how it is at the moment is with regards to mental health. And sometimes they are used mental health and well-being. And you'd see that, and why I point this out is because there are a lot of other factors that can, affect someone's well-being. And that we can talk about the physical health and the mental health. But it's very easy sometimes to talk about things with regards to cooking food and doing all these other things. But let's say you put them on an index, like with the happiness index, for example, and you talk about which country is happy or not. You'd find that these are, to me, I see that they're subjective in the sense because what do we put as the characteristics or are the variables that form these indexes? So you've talked about the, people going for a pint in the UK, people cooking together, and so many other things. Some other countries, for example, they don't have food, they can't have all of this, but still they have other elements that inform, the extent to which they feel they should be happy or not happy. And so what I was just trying to say that I really want it not be oversimplified in that kind of sense. And yeah, so that was my point as well, according to that.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for that. We want to hear now from Chris as well, because when organizations put initiatives to tackle the well-being or improve well-being in their organizations, they're often like standalone initiatives that look after physical health, mental health, psychological well-being. However, we know that financial well-being is also a key, which is probably often not given as much attention as the physical and psychological and social, perhaps. So, Chris, what kind of initiatives are we seeing from organizations that are there to support the financial well-being of employees?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I'll just wade in on that last discussion as well, with a very brief piece. I agree around certain areas of the world, mental health still has large stigma attached to it, and that's the bit that we need to break down. We all have physical health, we all have mental health, and we're all on a continuum. So some days I feel absolutely amazing, and I'm at this end, physically, mentally, but other days I might be, further down that chain. So we all have physical and mental health, and it's the stigma, it's the suffering in silence that is the real problem. In terms of financial well-being, it's one of the biggest causes of stress. I think over the last 12 months, especially here in the UK, but in many parts of the world, finances have been really stretched. With energy costs. Unlike you, Mona, we have very cold winters, so we have to we need to put the heating on, and with the energy prices really rising, and the cost of living.
We need, well, Chris, it doesn't, we don't switch here.
I need some sunshine now because yeah, it's pretty cold here. So yeah, it's a big source of stress, and it's really stretched. And I think the interesting part that I've seen this time is it's not just the poorest in society. I think we've seen it really affect a much larger group of society. What can organizations do? I've seen some amazing things, initiatives that have been going on, some really supportive stuff. I think the first thing, actually talking from a student point of view, is we need to start talking about finances in schools. We need to understand it. I never learned anything in my academic career about how to budget and how to, those skills. If your parents don't tell you, then you pretty much figure it out on your own. And I think we need to be more open about our finances and help people. And so it starts much younger. I think when we get into organizations, I've seen some great things around helping people with deposits, to get them out of rented accommodation into buying their own place, and having those interest-free help. There's various support packages that organizations have been doing. I mean, look, organizations can't do everything. It is a personal situation that you've got to work out as well. But I think having financial education as individuals will go a long way to helping people going forward.
Yeah, that's really key, isn't it? Like financial well-being is, like just to be aware and how to manage. And yeah, it's definitely something we need to sort of teach the younger generation.
It's often seen as one, very very boring, or two, oh, we don't talk about that. So that's a private matter, but actually we need to get it out in the open and have those conversations, because we've got to help people plan and budget.
Yes, absolutely. And on that note, Chris, just moving on, looking at some of the warning signs, as organizations, what could be some of the warning signs that sort of indicate that there's, more work to be done, and there's issues that need to be sorted in terms of employee well-being? Because I think organizations often just look at perhaps sickness days and then they just count them and that's it. But what could be some other indicators?
I think it really is important to think about your line managers in organizations. So I think, Ray, you touched on students maybe not having their camera on some of the lessons. If one of your employees are regularly coming to meetings and not putting their camera on, that to me, now look, there might be a legitimate reason. They might be having their house renovated or whatever it might be, but it could be that they might be struggling. So in this virtual world, or hybrid world that we work in now, it's a bit more challenging because you're not seeing people every day, and so it's picking up those signs. But it really is, I think, the key to really developing that strategy is these line managers and middle managers who can really understand and get to know their own teams and understand what's going on. And there's various tools now you can see. You can survey across the business and really hone in on specific teams where there's higher levels of stress or high level or potential burnout or whatever it might be, and you can really hone in on those areas. So the technology and the tools and the solutions that are coming through are really exciting. But there's nothing like that human touch from your own manager, and people generally don't leave their job, they leave their manager. So making sure that your manager is really up to speed on how to get the best out of their people and support their people. That's
great. That's great. We're trying to maximize your presence with us, Chris, because there's a lot here to explore. Maybe we'll just do one round before you leave us, Chris. I'll come back to you. I want to ask, from a professor's perspective, Dr. Ray, on a personal level, how do you manage the balance between your teaching responsibilities, your research, your admin work, and how do you juggle all these things and at the same time try to maintain your own well-being?
Thank you, Mona. I don't know if I'm an expert at it in that sense, but yeah, it is a very timely and an important, I think, question as well with regards to how we do this, because for years, let's say I'm working in different universities, but specifically working, in the UK and the Western kind of environment, you see that there is a lot of pressure at times to just, keep on working, delivering A, B, and C's. And sometimes that tends to really overshadow some of the other things which are significant in your life. And when you don't have that kind of balance, it actually can throw you off, and you can have the issues of mental health because you are too much focused on trying to get the objectives of your company, your universities, and all that. And so one of the things, and I think this, I got this from my wife, basically, who said, you need to slow down. Okay, you need to slow down. And there are times when you say, okay, this is time to go for a holiday, and that is it. Go for a holiday, leave the work behind. And that's what you do. Because there are times when you go to a holiday, you have your phone, you're looking at your emails all the time. And so you're still engaged with that. And that doesn't tend to then give you the break that you need to even rejuvenate. And so I think having those, that's one of the things which I've found to be very important to me. Have a holiday, have a break, remove yourself from the stresses of work. But then there are good elements of work that you might want to engage on. So sometimes one of the things which I found very interesting, and some people might think it's nerdy or whatever, is I tend, for example, when I talk about economics, because sometimes I teach economics in the UK and then in Dubai. And so how do I engage with people in Dubai, on our campus? And I would go to different areas in Dubai, like Deala, all these other areas, not the touristy areas. And I would just look at people, for example, try and see a monopoly market, try to see a monopolistic competitive market and just look at it and just interact with people. And then those are the examples that come to the classroom and just connect with the students. And you find that is very fulfilling because you feel like you have that kind of connection with your students. You feel that your trip there wasn't a boring trip. You got to learn something new. You were able to interact with the locals. And all of that then comes, to be part of your experience as you are. So it doesn't just be, become a teaching, kind of thing, but it's part of your life. It's what you're doing. And so I think if you're able to mirror them in a good way, not just to be workaholic, but find the positives of your job and then, have them as part of your teaching and part of your life, it can also make it a much better experience for you. And I think it has been well for me in terms of the mental health and also being able to at least enjoy the job that I'm doing.
That's great. That's great. I'll move to Chris because I know he will be leaving us in 5 minutes, and then I'll come back to Vic and we can continue the discussion. So Chris, we all have heard of the word presenteeism. However, recently I've been researching leavism, which is quite interesting. And this again came in the report, the CIPD report, where employees, they use their allocated time off, whether it's for annual leave or maybe if they're unwell, any kind of leave, and to do some work. And the study showed that nearly 2/3 of respondents actually report some sort of leavism in their organization. So that's really interesting, Chris. If you're booking a holiday or time off, as Ray mentioned, having that disconnection, what can organizations do to support employees to disconnect? Because it seems to be a trend, and we've all done it. We all, go on holidays and pack our work in our luggage as well. Are there any initiatives that you've seen, organizations implementing?
I think the core to this is flexibility. So if I think back to my dad's career, he retired 35 years ago. So he used to go into the office at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, finish at 5 o'clock, go home and spend time with his family. Nobody could get hold of him. Nobody had his home number. We had landlines back then, and he had the evening with his family and could switch off. In today's world, it's a 24/7 world that we live in, you can get hold of me at any time. Well, you can't, because I've put boundaries in place, and I think the key is having boundaries and organizations providing that flexibility. Now, I'm an early riser. I get up early. I'm really super productive. People think I'm crazy, but at 6 o'clock in the morning, I can really work very fast. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I am useless. I cannot do anything. I'm exhausted. I'm finished. Because and sometimes I like to work on a Sunday morning. Because it suits me. But then I like to do some errands, like getting a haircut on a Wednesday afternoon when it's not so busy. I have that flexibility, and creating that flexibility, because life is busy. Lots of things in life happen. You've got to pick the kids up from the school. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. So creating that environment where there's not a expectation where you have to be at the desk at a certain time every single day or whatever it might be, creating that flexible environment that suits people and trusts people, puts trust in them. We can all, there's technology now to see how much work people are doing. If we're focused on outcomes, we can build trust within organizations. But I think the days of when I first started, you had to be at your desk at this time and you're not allowed to leave at this time. I think those days are gone, because the world of work is completely different. And when you provide that flexible environment, the vast majority of people don't take the mickey. They get on and do it and really embrace it. So that would be my core. I think we actually had a number of conversations and discussions around the 4-day working week, which is starting to emerge here in the UK and in parts of North America as well. And I think it's an interesting conversation, actually. It's not going to work for everyone, but it's an interesting development, because our world of work is so different to what it was 20 years ago. And we've got to look at new models, because we haven't changed that model for a long time.
Brilliant. Chris Cummings, the CEO and founder of Wellbeing World of Work, joining us live from Brighton. We really, really appreciate you joining us today and providing these outstanding insights. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and best of luck with everything. Lovely to meet you, Vic and Ray, as well.
Yes, and we'll certainly connect again when you're, during the summit soon.
I'll be coming to the sunshine in February, so looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Chris.
See you soon.
Thank you, Chris.
So yeah, thank you very much, Ray and Vic. That's been really an interesting discussion. revolving around the world of work, the latest trends, the challenges that organizations face. And perhaps I'll move now to, Vic, talking about academia, Vic, what do you see some of the pressing challenges that you face, you experience or you hear from students that really impact their well-being? Do you see some, maybe from your experience, common themes arising? Perhaps it's, I don't know, during assignment submission or at the beginning of the semester, and how do you, what coping mechanisms do you provide students?
This is a very complex question because students are complex in their nature by their personality, as I said earlier on, culture and background. So what really puts pressure on a group of students might be slightly different from what put pressure on another set of students. But what is common among most of them is essentially submission deadlines and the pressure that mounts on the non-native speakers when they come to write their assessment, particularly coursework assessment. Exam, if it's numeric, most students are okay these days. But when they have to put their ideas on paper or type it up in a device, those who do not have the English abilities struggle, and that puts a lot of anxiety on them, which can then lead to mental health. The ones who combine work with studies also face similar issues in the sense that there's not inelastic amount of time available to students. They have a fixed amount of time to deal with work as well as do their coursework. So a lot of emails that I get or contacts that I've had from students is essentially about there's not enough time, can you extend the deadline? And as a university, we have to go by certain parameters. So it's very difficult. But what universities do generally, particularly in the UK and most of the advanced world, is to have a policy in place where if the student is struggling both physically or mentally in terms of health, they can seek help from well-being team. And we do have one in my current university, which is very supportive to students. So I would say things have become better compared to maybe 20 years ago, where, as Ray and Chris have said earlier on, the talk about mental health was less prominent in society. It's now much more common, and even the Global South is buying into the whole idea of supporting students to be able to do their work properly.
Yes, absolutely. Students really go through a lot. We only see them in the classroom, but, like all of us, there's a lot going on in their lives. There's a few students, for example, who join from abroad, and they just land in this new country. They have to sort out many things, their finances, their accommodation, settling in. It's really like all of this is going in the background. And with, as you said, Vic, in the beginning, getting to know the students, understanding the challenges and trying really to sort of signpost them to the right area. They also perhaps might feel nervous about working with different people, different cultures. Then there comes, of course, the trying to keep students engaged, which, of course, we all know concentration is challenged when you have a 4-lecture class. And this is where I want to bring Ray's expertise in. Ray, we're lecturing for 3-4 hours, and students get tired, we get tired. How do you maintain that engagement, Ray? Because you mentioned you're doing research on engagement and so on. And there's something that I often think about. Studies have shown that your brain sort of switches off every 20 minutes or so. Of course, it varies between one person to the other, and we cannot blame students. But who's in charge is us as professors. Ray, what are some of the initiatives that you do, or tips or tricks, that you do to kind of foster that engagement?
Yeah, Yeah, no, that's a very interesting one. And I just to give you a brief background, one of the reasons why I did my research, my PhD was actually on work engagement among academics, was because I was attending lecture, as a student, we've all been students, and when I was attending lectures, I would find that there are a few lecturers who were, engaging and keeping the class very interesting, but the majority of the lecturers were not keeping the class interesting, and I really wondered why. And I had a role model because my father used to be a very engaging kind of academic, and I attended his lecture even though it was in my class, and I was like super impressed. And how does he maintain that? And how come others are not maintaining that kind of level? And that drove me into my research and why I'm doing this. And one of the key elements that I realized is making a class an event. So this should become an event. Like from a lecturer's perspective, you actually go there to make it an event for the student. So it's not like a session that's going there, but people are going to experience an event, and you break it down, therefore, not to be that I'm going to lecture or talk for myself from the beginning to the end. Have different ways of involving the students, having the awareness of seeing at this point in time, the students are tired. At this point in time, the audience is not listening or paying attention, or my point has not come across properly. And that requires a lot of things, engaging with the audience, providing a friendly platform where audience can actually offer their own insights, not being or seen as the know-all, but a person who is able to accommodate different perspectives and engage and interact. And I think this helps quite a lot. And the reason being, if I take my own experience, I've had different sessions where I've decided at one point in time to just be the all-knowing lecturer and providing all this, information to the students, and it doesn't work. People get really bored really quickly, disconnected with you. But if you start doing things in a different manner where it's about interacting with people, asking people's perspectives, giving a break at regular intervals of break, because you know that they don't concentrate for a long period of time. I don't concentrate for that long period of time as well. Also adding other things, videos that give them something else to think about. I always have this idea of also lecturing with humor, the right humor, ensuring that they are also, at one point in time, develop positive emotions. Because one of my areas is once people are positive, they feel positive emotions tend to influence them to become more engaged and expect a better thing, in your sessions. And finally, maybe if I move on to that, there's one quote, I forgot now where it comes from, but the one quote that I always like is, there's nothing more infectious than enthusiasm, than the lack of enthusiasm. And so what this means basically is, if you go without passion, without energy, without desire, you infect all the classroom. And so one of the things that I practice it, and I think it's part of my mantra, in honesty, is I practice being enthusiastic. When I go into the classroom, it's all energy. Now that does mean at times you need to break it down, because if you go for energy for 3 hours in a row, you'll pass out by the end. So you have to time yourself. But it's something which is very important. Having enthusiasm, passion, and desire, and incorporating a few elements of it such that you are able to provide it and students can see it authentically, is one of the ways which I think can cause engagement in the classroom. I hope that covers a bit.
Yeah,
yes,
that's really great. So that enthusiasm and engagement, and that's really powerful. For me, I find it very difficult, Ray, to disconnect. I'm constantly thinking about my classes, what I'm going to do. Every encounter I come across, I always think, how can I make the student experience better? And sometimes even, when I'm sleeping, I'm thinking about my class, my work, my emails. It's really, really difficult. And the ideas come just before you sleep, don't they? But what I found to engage students, something that has been worked really, like, it's magical. It's giving students that connection with industry, because they're sitting on this chair in the classroom for a reason. And the reason is they want to excel in the world of work. So I feel bringing in industry collaborations, whether it's a guest speaker to talk about HR career, or working on projects for organizations, the excitement is just buzzing around the room. For example, last week, I brought in an HR director who had HR experience for over 16 years. And he just sat with students and talked to them about the career in HR, what to expect. things that we don't find in books. He even was talking about what's the best paid area to work in HR, which was interestingly remuneration experts designing remuneration packages. The challenges, these insights, and the students had the opportunity to ask questions. And for them, they don't daydream when they have this opportunity. So I feel that there's many, of course, techniques, tools, and tricks, but for me, that has really always worked. It's just they're very excited. Like every time they come, there's something new, something different. And as you said, Ray, it's just keeping it different every time, isn't it? Like having a surprise. Last week as well, we talked about in my class something about night shift work in my human resource and ethics, and the challenges that night shift workers face. So I, talked about it. We went through some of the material. And then as a surprise, I got someone who worked night shift in a call center. They didn't know this is coming. And he just came, to talk about his experience. So they could like put the theory into practice. And that was really like a magical moment. It's like creating that engagement because, they're going through a lot, and they're, in terms of their concentration, their, fatigue, stress, anxiety, all that really is affected. And perhaps I want to also ask Vic, what are the techniques or tools that you have? Do you have any that you could share with us to perhaps try and overcome that fatigue that students might experience sitting in long classes that may have worked for you, Vic?
Oh, absolutely. Just like you and Ray, one strategy doesn't work for all. What tends to work a lot for me is humor in the classroom. And the students, particularly if they are from face-saving societies, they tend to, or power distance societies, they tend to perceive their professor as a superior to them. Of course, we have a much higher position as far as the structure is concerned, but once we are in the classroom, we have to let the guards down to be very close to them. And to me, you can't do that through any other means other than humor. So I bring in the bad things that have happened to me when I travel the world and the good things that have happened to me, as well as things that happen in my house, whether it's my little ones causing trouble or, some sort of a scenario between my wife and myself. I bring those things and it surprises them because some of them do not believe, they don't expect that I could talk about certain things like that in the classroom. But also something that has happened in the news, something that is very strange, bringing it to the classroom to share with the students, reconnects them. Because let's face it, some of the qualitative subjects are really boring. I teach economics also, but my experience with numerical subjects is very different from non-numerical subjects. But that's not to assume that all students like numbers. There are a vast majority of students who don't like numbers or graphs also. So it's a fine balance between what works for one group. Even within the same year, you might find a group that is well engaged with qualitative and the other one that is not. But the humor is very, very meaningful to me. But I also try to ensure that they know I have authority in the classroom. And that authority is what they pay for, essentially. Students come to us to learn. So they tend to have positive emotions when they feel they've learned something new in the classroom. And so that means that I have to put myself in a slightly stressful situation where I have to prepare a lot before the class. But once you've done it for several years, it becomes almost second nature. So ensuring that students learn from you and ensuring that they don't perceive you as a monster in the classroom, to me, works very, very well. There are other things I'd like to talk about in terms of, happiness and well-being in general, but I think we probably will visit that soon, and I would like to comment on that.
Yeah, Vic, I mean, tell us a little bit about, you do talk a lot about the happiness index and well-being. What other insights do you have for us?
So I did two research on the happiness issue in the UAE. One was on measuring happiness in the UAE using organizational index. So in that research, what we tried to do, me serving as the principal investigator, was to look at what are the measures that organizations put in place to ensure that their workers are happy. And we found that UAE is very different. They provide insurance for expatriates, which is a very positive thing. So that increases the happiness level of employees. Most organizations also provide generous bonuses and commissions, which is a very good measure of happiness. Chris talked earlier on about financial factor as being necessary in well-being. We also notice that the relationship with supervisors is very, very important. And in organizations where there's a lot of micromanagement, where the supervisor is overlooking the employee all the time, happiness tends to go down. So we did this research about 4 years ago, and that was a very interesting finding. But quite apart from that, I don't want us to leave here today thinking society is plagued with a lot of mental health issues, because as Steve Pinker has said, society has made a lot of progress over the years and now is better than before. And before, I'm talking of prehistoric times, or maybe before the Second World War, for example, where we did not discover penicillin, we did not discover vaccines, and all these things have made our lives much better today than several years ago. But quite apart from that, we probably know this anyway. About 15 million people suffer from stroke each year. 15 million is a huge number, probably higher than the population of Mali, Burkina Faso, and some countries out there. Only 5 million of those people survive, and other 5 million permanently become sick. But another statistics in the UK point to the fact that 49% of stroke sufferers survive. So I just want to say that things have improved. We might criticize the availability of devices and the pressures that we face by paying high school fees, where you have to pay school fees, and the pressures brought on us by economic factors. But society has become much better. And Barack Obama said once that if you are confused between choosing when to leave, whether now or then, choose now. So I'll choose now. It's much better.
Thank you very much, Vic. And yeah, so really just to recap, we are making huge progress in the field of well-being at work. Organizations are supporting their employees. We see universities also supporting their students and faculty. I personally are sitting now on well-being committees and mental health committees, and I see, the ideas are just outstanding. So that's really, really positive to see that this is now at the forefront of organizations. We also heard from Chris Cummings, the CEO of Wellbeing at World of Work, and his perspective on topics such as presenteeism, leavism, and of course from Ray on the topic of engagement and how he engages his students in the classroom. And that's all we've got time for on this episode of International Academic Space. Our topic today was Why Wellbeing Matters, Empowering Academic Institutions. We look forward to hosting you in the next session, and goodbye from me. And thank you very much, Vic and Ray.
Thank you.